Something is quietly killing ambitious science fiction television. Not bad writing, not lack of audience, not creative exhaustion. Quarterly earnings reports, the streaming era promised us more content, more diversity, more willingness to take risks on long-form storytelling that broadcast television never could. And in some ways, it delivered. We got extraordinary things. But we also got a new and insidious kind of cancellation. Shows pulled not because they were failing, but because they weren't growing fast enough. Shows with passionate, loyal audiences cancelled because that audience wasn't the right size for a spreadsheet. Stories left unfinished because a subscriber number came in below a projected target. Today, I want to talk about 5 shows that deserved so much better. Shows I loved. Shows that had years of story left to tell. And what their cancellations tell us about the system that ended them. Lost in Space, Netflix, 3 seasons, cancelled in 2021. The reboot of the classic 1960s series was everything modern family science fiction should be. Visually stunning, emotionally genuine, a Robinson family that felt like a real family, complicated, loving, occasionally infuriating in exactly the way real families are. But more than that, it built a genuinely interesting alien mythology across 3 seasons. The robot, the alien technology, the questions about where it all came from and what it meant, questions that were clearly building toward answers that we never got. 3 seasons was the story of getting to their destination, the story of what happened when they arrived, what they found, what it meant, what the alien technology actually was. That was the story Netflix cancelled. The showrunners knew it was coming. The 3rd season was compressed. Storylines accelerated, resolutions rushed, because they were told it would be the last. What we got was a conclusion of sorts. What we deserved was 2 more seasons of a show at the height of its powers. Netflix cancelled it because the viewing numbers, while solid, weren't growing. A show that had found its audience wasn't enough. They needed a show that was still finding one. That is the logic that is killing good television. Travelers, Netflix, 3 seasons, cancelled in 2018. If you haven't watched Travelers, please stop this video, go watch it and come back. The concept is one of the most elegant in recent science fiction. Consciousness from a dying future is sent back and inserted into people at the moment of their death, people whose deaths are recorded in historical records. The travelers take over those bodies, live those lives, and try to change the timeline to prevent the catastrophe that destroyed their world. What that means in practice is that every episode is simultaneously a time travel story, a character study, and a meditation on identity. What does it mean to be a person when your consciousness inhabits someone else's body, someone else's relationships, someone else's life? What do you owe the people who loved the person you replaced? 3 seasons, each one better than the last. A mythology that was clearly building towards something extraordinary. And then Netflix cancelled it, quietly, without even a proper announcement at first. A show that cost relatively little to produce, that had a devoted international audience, that was doing something genuinely original, gone. Because the algorithm said so. The Orville, Fox, then Hulu. 3 seasons, currently on hiatus that feels permanent. Seth MacFarlane set out to make a love letter to Star Trek. What he actually made, accidentally or deliberately, was something that captured what Star Trek fans actually wanted from Trek at a time when official Trek had lost its way. The Orville took its science seriously, it took its characters seriously. It was funny in the way that good science fiction can be funny, not at the expense of the ideas, but alongside them. And it built something over 3 seasons that very few shows manage, a crew you genuinely cared about, placed in situations that genuinely mattered. The episode that stays with me most is one where a crew member is accidentally sent back to Earth in the 2000s and builds a life there over years before the ship comes back for him. The moral question at the heart of that episode, was it right to take him back, is exactly the kind of question the Orville asked consistently and answered honestly. Season 3 on Hulu was extraordinary. Longer episodes, more ambitious storytelling, a show that had found a new gear, and then nothing, no renewal, no cancellation announcement, just silence, the kind of silence that feels like a decision has been made but nobody wants to say it out loud. A show that could have run 10 seasons, sitting in limbo because a streaming platform's priorities shifted, Continuum, showcased then various streaming platforms. 4 seasons, ended 2015. A Vancouver-shot Canadian series that deserved a global audience and never quite got one. Kira Cameron is a police officer from 2077 who is accidentally sent back to 2012 along with a group of terrorists she was trying to stop. She has to work with present-day police to stop them, while concealing who she really is and trying to find a way home. What makes Continuum extraordinary is what it does with that premise over time, because the longer you watch, the more uncomfortable the moral ground becomes. The future Kira is trying to protect is a corporate dystopia, a world run by a consortium of corporations that has effectively replaced democratic government. The terrorists she is chasing are, depending on your perspective, freedom fighters trying to prevent that future from ever happening. She is, in a very real sense, the villain of her own story. 4 seasons, a mythology that kept deepening, an ending that was satisfying enough but clearly compressed by a show that knew its time was running out. What Continuum could have been with 2 more seasons and a proper ending, that is the loss. Manifest. NBC, then Netflix. 4 seasons, a complicated story. Manifest was cancelled by NBC after 3 seasons despite a passionate fan base. The fans responded with one of the most sustained campaign efforts in recent streaming history. Petitions, social media pressure, the works. Netflix picked it up, gave it a 4th and final season, split into 2 parts. And here is where I have to be honest. The ending of Manifest was divisive. Some fans felt it delivered, others felt that 4 seasons of mystery and mythology resolved in ways that felt rushed and not fully earned. But here is what matters for this video. A show with a genuinely original premise, 828 passengers on a flight return 5 years later without having aged, having missed 5 years of their lives, now experiencing visions that seem to guide them toward a purpose they don't understand, deserved a proper ending on its own terms. Not a compressed scramble to wrap up years of storyline in the time available. What NBC cancelled, Netflix tried to rescue. The rescue was partial. The show deserved better than either outcome gave it. So what does all of this tell us? 5 shows, different networks, different streaming platforms, different genres, different audiences, but the same underlying story. Good science fiction, ambitious, character-driven, mythology-building science fiction requires time. It requires the ability to plant seeds in Season 1 that don't flower until Season 3. It requires audiences to invest before they are rewarded. It requires patience that the current streaming economic model is structurally unable to provide. The broadcast era had its own problems. Shows cancelled on a whim. Time slot changes designed to kill audiences. Creative interference from networks who didn't understand what they had. But the streaming era promised something different. Binge culture, we were told, was built for exactly this kind of long-form storytelling. No more waiting a week between episodes, no more ratings cliffs. Just story, delivered at the pace the audience chose. What we got instead was a different problem, not cancellation by ratings, cancellation by algorithm. Not killed by low audiences, killed by audiences that weren't growing fast enough. Not ended by network interference, ended by a subscriber projection that came in 3% below a target set in a meeting none of us were in. The shows on this list were not failures, they were casualties. And until the economics of streaming change, until there is a model that rewards loyal audiences rather than just growing ones, there will be more casualties, more stories left unfinished, more worlds abandoned before we saw what they were building toward. Next time, another series that deserved so much better. See you then. If you're tired of sci-fi content that doesn't take the genre seriously, hit like, it helps. Subscribe and join the conversation. New video every week. Out there is exactly where we're going.